Virtual Fighter 6 looks very, very good. Now, before we jump onto this hype train or anything like that, there's two aspects as to why. The Game Awards showing actual gameplay, you know, what we saw, a little snippet. And then you also have CES 25, which happened yesterday, with NVIDIA just kind of proposing what they can be doing, trying to do some sales tactics, some type of engine, whether it's cinematic or whatever that may be. But there's two there, and those two videos, one actual gameplay footage, one definitely not gameplay footage. What we saw is similarity in both of those. Is kind of, it's something that stuck out to everybody, right? Which is the blocking animations and just how it looks great to not have a lot of animation in totality. I know sometimes now Tekken 8 is getting some flack with that, just with over, you know, the heat dash, heat burst, rage arts, and, you know, with the Clive situation also, they wanted him more in Soul Calibur versus just Tekken. So there's a lot of little complications going on with Tekken 8, but it's not just that. I'm not trying to just take shots at Tekken 8. It's more like Tekken 8 now gets that 3D competition that we've been looking for a long time. If you're an OG fighting game player, then you know exactly what all this is. But if you've never played fighting games until recent days, you know usually the big three are always going to be taking over, alongside with, of course, Ultimate, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, if you're around that. I'm thinking like more new era, so you're thinking Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Tekken. But this is really cool how Virtual Fighter is coming around. I mean, how cool would it have Virtual Fighter in virtual reality? Can somebody make that happen already, right? Virtual Fighter, virtual reality, just somebody needs to make that happen. Anyways, this is great for one, actual fighting gamers. If it's like the idea of how Street Fighter 6, Mortal Kombat 1, and also Tekken 8 are, which is more of a simplistic approach, but still has their skill gap, at least to an extent. I know some people proclaim it to not really have that skill gap still these days, but if they really take this approach where they're really getting into the martial arts aspects, the mechanics, the technical aspects and propositions to what makes a fighting game, like those blocking animations look insane, and that really will create a full immersion. So if they can do that type of aspect along with creating a simplified approach, not really mashing and all of that, but at least get some casuals rolling. But Virtual Fighter never really has been super duper mainstream, but I mean, it's known to everybody in fighting game culture. And if they can make it simplified to bring in a lot of new players, but don't go over the route to where like the dry rushes and all that with Street Fighter and with Tekken, if you can keep it more of an approach where it's like, yeah, this is really a skillful game, similar to how Tekken has always been historically. And this is going to be a very unique situation because fighting games have already had a massive year. Fighting games, I feel, still are not talked about enough on overall the year they've had, year and a half now they've had, or maybe even 2 years now, with since that launch of Street Fighter 6. When Street Fighter 6 came out, then you had just so many in between fighters, but of course you had the Street Fighter 6, then you had the Mortal Kombat shortly after, literally that September, after the summer Street Fighter 6 was released. Then a little while later you have Tekken 8, of course, within those next few months going into the early next year, which was last year now, which they just passed their 1 year for the most part, right? Or is it the end of this month? I think it's the end of this month they passed their year, Tekken 8. But you have those 3 games already, and then in between you just have so many other fighting games that have now, and then you have the classic collections, the Capcom fighting collections being announced, and you just know there's gonna be a lot more rolling around. This is gonna go in with the heavy head honchos now, because this looks crazy good. Right now we can always argue is Sparking Zero a fighting game, you can always argue at 2XKO, like all of those you can argue, anime fighters, arena fighters. But there's one thing for damn sure, you're gonna respect this as a fighter, and this is probably really gonna determine the real skill gaps if that's what it takes to execute. It already looks like somewhat of a higher execution game, which is good, right? People really want to test their limits when it comes down to these games. So I cannot wait. When you look at the actual fighting gameplay, it looks phenomenal. It looks like the way that we always remember 3D, but in this aspect. Tekken doesn't, I mean, it feels like Tekken, but it doesn't feel like Tekken. It's weird to explain. I know y'all kind of know what I mean. And so to see this aspect of 3D gaming, I know people have been begging for this. People have been begging for another Soul Calibur also. And there's other 3D fighting games that people really want also. I don't know. What else have people been wanting? I know, like in general in fighting games, people wanted King of Fighters. People wanted Soul Calibur. People wanted Virtual Fighter. Any type of OG aspect too. So it's I'm not saying anything else like that, but as long as the forefront goes Virtual Fighter, I know this has to be the ultimate. They had to be taking notes as to what, because Tekken 8 graphics wise looks incredible, right? I still even think MK1 looks really good, the way they took their humanized approach, because MK1 has more of a human approach. I mean, they're immortals for the most part. There's nothing mortal about Mortal Kombat, but they have more of like that human approach now, right? They're leaner, they're not as bulky. And I think Virtua Fighter, because like Street Fighter 6, everybody's kind of bulky, and you know, Tekken 8's like real bulky. But you see here, this looks very human. I mean, to me, at least in my opinion, it looks humanized, and it just looks so fucking cool, man. I have to give them props where I give them props. And Virtua Fighter is gonna take over. If this game looks closely to even being like this, it's gonna take over. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm like, what the hell is this? You see it, and yeah, it still has a pretty cool, like, humanized approach when you're looking at the fighting aspects of it, and it's swift. The cinematics looks crazy. If it could be a mesh of like the gameplay we saw in terms of like, I don't know if it's like a pre-alpha or alpha, whatever that's in right now, and the aspects of how the cinematic looks, bro, virtual reality is gonna look crazy. Imagine playing that like on a handheld too. Like if you play it like on a Steam Deck while you're on the go. We're always looking for something where you can play on the handheld. And then also lore, right? What lore we're gonna be getting in Virtual Fighter. I know a lot of people are gonna be wanting it. A lot of aspirations for that too. I like how they kind of just introduced some of the characters, also like the designs and everything. So I think it was it 2 characters they showed right now with Virtual Fighter? I don't know Virtual Fighter in depth, but I do remember it back then, back in arcade era. If you're somebody like me in arcade era, we had so many options with fighting games. So I really gonna deem this year, in my opinion, the best year since the arcade era right now. I don't think there's any argument that the arcade era first, which was us, old ass motherfuckers, and then you go to this era. This is the best era of fighting games in the modern era of fighting game scene, fighting game culture, fighting game community. FGC is literally at the best. Once this game releases, that's peak. Unless they're bringing another type 3D game where 3D competition starts all over again, because 3D had heavy competition back then. Even Mortal Kombat was all 3D back then. Even people don't even remember Mortal Kombat as that, or people that barely play Mortal Kombat now that are a lot younger, they don't recognize that 3D had tons of, like, 3D fighting games were like neck and neck and going in competition. Like, it was the absolute revelation, and it was the absolute like trend-setting aspect to have a 3D fighting game on deck. So there were so many fighting games that were not even that known, that didn't get as much love either. And so this right here, bringing it back, is really, I mean, it's not giving Tekken 8 a jab like that, because they're cool with Tekken 8 also, like the developers aspects. I mean, they're showing love to each other on this, but it still looks cool to see this type of situation, man. Like, we need, games do need competition at the most part. I mean, it's why like MK1 is kind of dried down right now, because MK1 kind of just does their own thing. They're like Call of Duty, right? So they do their own thing. They don't really like care. They're kind of just in their own lane on how they do their fighting games. So they're just like, whatever, I don't really care. We're not in competition with anybody. We're just gonna do whatever we want. So, which is why they do get a lot of flack, and they have a lot of love, right? They're down to try things, but a lot of it is failures. A lot of it are wins. So that's just the Mortal Kombat route. Here is like gonna be absolutely compared to Tekken 8. Hands down, no matter what. Not just any 3D fighting game, but this in particular, for sure, is definitely going to be compared to Tekken 8, because it was like that back then, and it's definitely going to be like that now. Virtua Fighter 6 coming up on board, knowing what they're doing, and I know I'm just going on yapping, but I'm just actually very excited, and I just saw this like full-on fucking cinematic, whatever this is, or pre-rendered story mode type thing, or scene, or a cutscene, whatever it is we're looking at with this thing that is deemed to not be actual gameplay, still looks damn good. Because when you put that together in comparison with the actual gameplay we saw at the Game Awards and what we saw at CES 25, I'm like, holy shit, like we got something here, man. Boys, if you like fighting games, and I love fighting games, I cover fighting games here and on my other channel, and I I cannot just be like, I don't know, man. I'm blown away. Y'all got to be letting me know what's up, man. Are y'all like interested in this? Or even if you're not really a fan of fighting games, I think if you see this and you do martial arts in real life or jujitsu or any type of, or you play like games like UFC, you're going to watch this and you'll be like, oh shit, like those blocking animations are pretty fire, man. But y'all got to be letting me know what's up. Also, thanks for hitting us up on those community posts. Thanks for those that are subscribing and liking and just coming through, man. And it really does mean a lot. As we like to treat our channel like a game cast. Like you just kind of we just talk games and we love games. We're just fans of it. And so I would love for y'all to come through, drop your thoughts, comments, man. And it's always good to have you, man. I write back to everyone that wants to come through or just hit us up with the community stuff. I appreciate y'all, man. Peace.